So I want to go into something that's pretty darn important. And I don't want to take a lot of time getting right to the backbone of the entire situation. I want you to understand that I get it. You're stuck in between Republicans and Democrats telling you how to live your life. And they pretty much control everything because at the end of the day, they own the companies, they're the billionaires, so on and so forth. So it is what it is. And us independents in the middle, we feel frustrated, I think the most, because at the end of the day, we don't feel like we really get to connect with anybody that's truly in power. Now, the big lie, not to waste any time, and that's exactly what this video is about, is essentially that there is no fraud or not much fraud going on with the Social Security Administration. And in one breath, the Democrats will tell you that essentially there's no fraud, but then in the other breath, they will tell you about how there is fraud by what the Republicans are doing inside the Social Security Administration. Now, remember, the Democrats do not want to show that there was fraud because we are coming out of Democrat rule of the Social Security Administration through Commissioner Kijikazi and Commissioner Martin O'Malley. Now, with that said, at the same time, keeping all of this in mind, is that the Republicans want to show fraud because they want people to be pissed about their money not being properly used. That is the game, because at the end of the day, they want voters. So here's the thing. We have this article, right? Came out, goes through basically, essentially the bureaucrat and the billionaire inside DOGE's chaotic takeover of Social Security. I'm going to go through this, but I want you to focus on a couple of things as we go through this, because I think it's super important for you to understand the culture of what's going on. Fraud is rampant. It's rampant all over the world. It is rampant inside the United States. Okay? We can make systems of banking that won't allow fraud. We just don't. Because people seem to be able to make money off of it that control those banks. We could make a system where people couldn't cheat on tests, but we don't. We can make a system where politicians can't get elected by big money taking over them, but we don't. So just keep in mind as we go through this structurally, just a structural aspect of this, what fraud is and who is arguing that there is fraud and who is arguing that there's not fraud. Real quick, Princess Diana, thank you for the $2 donation. Excellent. Love the new farm video. That's awesome. Very, very cool. So let's get right into it real quick. All right. Elon Musk stood before a giant American flag at a Wisconsin political rally in March and rolled out an eye-popping allegation as rampant fraud at the Social Security Administration. Scammers, he said, were making 40% of all calls to the agency's customer service line. Now, right off the bat, do any of you believe that 40% of the incoming calls to the Social Security Administration were in fact fraudulent? Probably not, right? That doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense to me. Should make sense to you. That's pretty ridiculous. Now, you could look at it another way. You could say, hey, there was some automated system, like how they do in China. They line up a bunch of phones, they line up a bunch of computers with servers, and they just hit the server over and over and over and over again. That's a lot of YouTubers out there are using that tactic to get more views, more subscribers, and stuff like that. I have a clean channel, but some of my competitors do not. Okay. Social Security employees knew the billionaire's claim had no basis in fact. After journalists followed up, staff members began drafting a response correcting the record. That's when Leland Dudek plucked from a mid-level job only 6 weeks earlier to run Social Security because of his willingness to cooperate with Mr. Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, got an angry call from the White House, according to several people familiar with the exchange. Quote, the number is 40%, insisted Katie Miller, a top administration aide who was working closely with Mr. Musk, according to one of the people familiar with the April 1 call. President Trump believed Mr. Musk, she said, do not contradict the president, end quote. Okay, so the Republicans want us to believe that there's fraud. Don't worry, there's tons of it. We're going to go through lots of employees that created fake Social Security numbers inside the Social Security Administration that were caught. Don't worry, we're going to go through them. Throughout the early months of this Trump presidency, Mr. Musk and his allies systematically built a false narrative of widespread fraud at the Social Security Administration based on misinterpreted data, using their claims to justify an aggressive effort to gain access to personal information on millions of Americans, a New York Times investigation has found. Yeah, they got the numbers wrong. They did. But they did catch a lot of fraudsters. They did. They just didn't catch as many as they'd hoped to. Although this article is going to make it seem like there's just no fraud. Everything's perfect. Everything's hunky-dory. Everything's amazing, guys. Don't you know? The thing you pay into your entire life that pays you shit money each month, it's amazing. Yeah, sign you up. You're already signed up. You don't get a choice. You don't get a choice. Their work has led to the departures of thousands of employees, thinning an already overstretched workforce and setting off a wave of public anxiety over the state of the agency, administering politically sacrosanct retirement benefits that Mr. Trump has vowed to protect. Okay. All right. So makes sense. Because, if you hurt Social Security, you don't get voted in again. Now, Trump can't get voted in again, but he's popular. And if he gets the economy on track, and there's no COVID or other Pharaoh leveling situations that occur, they might give him a third term. Who knows? People really like him. I keep watching CNN and MSNBC, and they keep telling me that people don't like him. I got to be honest. A lot of people like him because a lot of the stuff he says is making a lot of sense about treating Americans well. The deprioritizing of some individuals that are not Americans and the prioritizing of Americans in a time where the economy was flushed, a lot of people are going to like that. That's going to make sense to a lot of people. Even if he doesn't save the economy, pushing that narrative alone is a win. It's a solid win. Anna Hample, thank you for the 99-cent donation. Super appreciate it. That's awesome. Very, very cool. Very cool. Their work has led to the departure of those thousands of employees. Mr. Musk has left Washington amid a blow-up with Mr. Trump, and some of his top aides at DOGE have also departed, leaving federal workers and the public to assess what Mr. Musk's tornado-like path through Washington yielded. At Social Security, Mr. Musk's efforts amount to a case study in what happened when his team of government novices ran a critical government agency through misinformation and social media blasts. Now remember, to the Democrats, Musk, bad. Musk, dumb. Musk, not know how to run company. Musk uses other people to figure everything out. Okay, cool, awesome. Does Elon have an emotional control problem? Yes. Does Elon have a billionaire ego? Yeah, for sure. It's exactly what we would expect from him is what's happening to him. All right. The Times investigation found that Mr. Musk became fixated on the program in early February after members of his team misread government spending data. A pivotal and previously unreported moment that DOGE believed had exposed massive fraud inside the agency. This is correct. A man who's used to innovating the future of technology and uses modern coding systems was confused, along with his team, by systems that were made not just like a decade ago, but decades and decades ago. That's true. The Social Security Administration did fool this man and his team by having such shit programs that they weren't sure how the coding worked. That's true. In response, Mr. Musk's team mobilized dozens of Social Security employees to affirm their views about fraud and began a project to ensure dead people were properly classified so they weren't mistakenly paid, even though DOGE officials acknowledged it in an internal memo that payments were not being made in those cases. Okay, very good. Just to be clear, they did find some very old people who had passed away that were in fact receiving checks. And they found a lot more people who had passed away, or we don't know where they are. We don't know. That essentially had a lot of earnings attributed to them through the IRS, but they clearly were not alive. So, again, the article is pushing the agenda that fraud wasn't there. Musk must have just, whatever. Now, just to make clear, it was under the Biden administration that OIG pushed the agenda to have these old ancient people gone through and structurally edited to be terminated from the system as a current living individual. But they said it's going to cost too many millions to do it. We're not doing it. Okay, so it was too expensive to fix fraud during the Biden era. It became a pet project of a billionaire in the Trump era. That's the real summary here. All right. DOGE leaders pressured agency executives to hire a 21-year-old former intern at Palantir, a data analyst and technology firm, and grant him access to the personal data of every Social Security cardholder, despite the executive's concerns that he lacked a sufficient training to handle such sensitive information. Could they give him the training? Obviously, he's a genius. Obviously, he's figured out things that most regular human beings can't. Could they give him the training? That's what the judges ruled, that you got to give him the training to know how to properly access, utilize, and, deliver the information. Okay. Mr. Musk's deputies became so intent on their work at Social Security that they pushed employees to continue giving them access to sensitive agency data, even after a federal judge demanded that DOGE's access be cut off. According to two people familiar with the events, the Supreme Court ruled this month that DOGE's access can resume. Is anybody wondering how many people are illegally leaking stories of what happens inside the SSA to the press while claiming that they're these angels of democracy? Have any of you guys realized that they seem to keep coming up with source statements of people that constantly say negative things, right? And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who's in. Martin O'Malley, somebody took an illegal recording, threw it to the news, right? Commissioner Dudek, illegal recording, gave it to the news. Commissioner, the new individual, the banker, right? Bisignano, okay? Took an illegal recording, gave it to the news. I don't understand how that's not fraud on the American people. You are literally taking closed office government communications from the commissioner to the highest level generals at the SSA and spewing that onto the airwaves. I mean, look, I like that we get to hear it. We get to hear the shit show of humanistic tendencies that these commissioners have. Don't get me wrong. I love it. Sign me up for more. I'm just amazed that in the most secure agency of all that's supposed to be overlooking our Social Security number, the money we pay in our entire life, what benefits we're going to get ultimately, I'm just a little surprised at the end of the day. They don't have that shit on lockdown. But again, there's no fraud. Everybody remain calm. Cool. Okay, so Mr. Musk deputies became so intent on their work at Social Security, they pushed employees to continue giving them access. They got access because they had Leland Dudek in as commissioner. He was pro them. That's how he got the position. The Times also reviewed previously unreported emails that showed how DOGE members used the agency for political aims, directing Mr. Dudek to cancel the important contracts in Maine after the state's governor, a Democrat, clashed with Trump. I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it. That's what it looked like to me. It looked like a pissy battle. Does anybody seem a little bit sad that politicians have control over what you pay in your entire life? Does anybody seem like, maybe this shouldn't be handled by the government at all? We all talk about how if it was privatized, it would be terrible. It'd be horrible. We couldn't trust them. I've heard more versions of fraud in this write-up that's pro-Democrat. I mean, we haven't even covered 6 months in this document. This is a 3-month event situation. Okay, Mr. Dudek to cancel important contracts. This account of DOGE's Social Security takeover is based on interviews with more than 70 current and former employees, many of whom spoke on the condition of being anonymous out of fear of retaliation, and review of hundreds of pages of internal documents and court records. So just to be clear, when they leave the government and sign the document that says they're not allowed to talk about things that are happening because it's supposed to be confidential, they had 70 current and former employees. 70 current and former employees selling information to the news networks. Just let that sink in for a moment. Just let that nice, you know what I mean? Get a nice facial going on of basically 70 current and former employees who requested to remain anonymous, literally got paid or somehow benefited from essentially releasing internal documents and giving statements as to what was going on inside the SSA. Does anybody, and remember, if you read this as a non-attorney, this account of DOGE's Social Security takeover is based on interviews with more than 70 current and former employees, many of whom spoke on the condition of being anonymous out of fear of retaliation and review of hundreds of pages of internal documents and court records. Seems fine. You just read it like that's fine. But it is, when you just think about it for like more than 2 seconds, it is 70 people who got paid or benefited from talking to the news and releasing internal documents. That's 70 cases of fraud. Criminal prosecution fraud. Thrust into the center of the DOGE drama was Mr. Dudek, the acting Social Security Commissioner for nearly 3 months. He told others that he aimed to comply with the orders from DOGE and the White House while keeping Social Security from suffering what he saw as potentially disastrous consequences if the DOGE plans for slashing staff and changing policies were fully realized. Is it not a little odd that in the political warfare over your Social Security benefits, it would appear that the Social Security Administration leaks a lot of information to Democrats, tattletaling on the shit job the Republicans are doing? Now, granted, I believed that the Social Security Administration was going to have more of a meltdown. There's still time, but I believe that there was going to be more of a meltdown than what we actually saw. We haven't seen it. You know what that means? As of right now, yes, they had bugs. Yes, they had problems. Yes, they had to get rid of these personnel, combine regional offices. As of right now, the entire system did not melt down. Do you know what that means? It doesn't mean that Trump is great. It just means that he was a bit right. He was. We hope that he now modernizes it so that at the end of the day, we have a better, more efficient system. Because if we keep going the way we are, we're not going to be able to afford to pay the people that distribute our funds to us. Somebody will argue, you'll see them in the comments, that the machines mostly do that. Okay, how many of you have an iPhone that has to have an update every month and a half because there's some bug that can access your information? What about a computer program that seems to break every time you update to the new operating system? Yeah, we need tech. We need tech people because those computers, and it's great to say quantum this and AI that, if they don't get fixed, they fail. Okay. So thrust into the center of the DOGE drama was Mr. Dudek, the acting Social Security Commissioner for nearly 3 months. So far, the agency's core functions, like sending monthly checks to 74 million Americans, have remained largely intact. What a surprise. What a magical unicorn of a moment. Doesn't it make you feel like you're just sitting on a farm and a cow walks over to you and has no idea why you're there? Doesn't it just make you feel wondrous? Okay. But under pressure from Mr. Musk's team, nearly half the Social Security Administration is 140 senior executives, and thousands of employees overall have taken buyouts or retired. As many as 12% of staff members out of a bureaucracy that numbered around 57,000 people are expected to depart their jobs as part of DOGE's cost-cutting plan. So they got rid of 7,000 people. It didn't go into flames. I thought it would. I did. I still believe they need more employees, but again, I've never run a giant agency or a giant corporation. F what I know, right? I mean, I don't have tons of AI doing my thing, right? It's me on June 17th at 10:12 p.m. telling you what's going on. You know, I'm not a computer. That's an AI replication of a humanistic tendency to see this. No, it's me. To try to make up for the staffing shortfall, the agencies encourage specialized professionals like lawyers, human resource staff, and technologists to take reassignments in customer service jobs, often at higher pay than what the people they're replacing had made. Workers have said they felt pressured to volunteer for reassignments or else risk being fired later. So just to be clear, they did what every corporation does when it's in the shitter. They file bankruptcy, usually 11, and then they redistribute, reassign, recalculate, refigure out how to make the thing work. They get rid of some stores. They get rid of some employees. Did we need more customer service people? Yeah, people at the Social Security Administration, let's just be fair about this. A lot of them don't want to do customer service because dealing with disabled and elderly people who sometimes, largely, are pissed is not what I would call a nice job. It's not. How many times have you guys called the Social Security Administration to wish them a happy SSA day? No, you call when something went wrong or you need something quick. That's when you call. At the same time, concern over DOGE-induced policy changes has caused members of the public to clog the agency's phone lines and crowd into field offices. More Americans have claimed that their Social Security benefits earlier. Agency data shows sacrificing higher payments down the road for financial certainty now. And with the record number of retirement claims filed this year, the agency has been battling a growing backlog, internal emails show. What they haven't released to you yet, which I hope you start thinking about, is the reality that because a lot more people are taking the retirement benefits at 62 because they know their break-even date is into the 70s, as if they had taken it at 67 or 70. I mean, break-even date's way down the line. The bottom line is people now know that the number one thing you don't want to do is leave the government money that you are owed. If you take your retirement benefits at 62 and you have some money, then that is money you can invest that you will make vastly more on than if you had waited to 67. If you're somebody who's 62 and thinking about the future of Social Security, you know that if all these people start taking it at 62, that trust fund is going to run out a lot faster. It's already 8 to 9 years and it's hit the fan because we passed the Social Security Fairness Act, which technically wasn't fair. They always do that. Technically, it basically helped out people who had a dual pension, which, you know, when you go to somebody who has a single pension known as retirement and they're only getting, let's say, $1,000 a month, they don't feel like helping out. To be fair, dual pension people was the direction to go. To be fair, I mean, look, hey, I will stand back and say, whatever money we can get to the American people, let's do it. Let's not, which is what the Biden administration was doing. They were trying to get SSI Title 16 benefits hooked up into being the replacement that paid for a lot of new immigrants. Back to the Nixon era policy of essentially who as an entrant got paid money each month. Yeah. SSI comes from general taxes, 7 years, entrants known as immigrants, asylum seekers, right? Those who are trafficked, stuff like that. At the same time, concern over DOGE-induced policy changes has caused members of the public to clog the agency's phone lines. Okay, well, let's be fair. People want to know what's going on with their money. And there's some shitty YouTube channels out there that made people call the SSA. They're like, call right now and find this out. And the things that they had to find out about were literally things like they could have either looked up or they could have just looked up the law on it. That's what they could have done that. Okay. Crowd into field offices, they said. No, the field offices are now on a, you go there and they'll set you up for an appointment in the future. Okay. Administration officials, in response to questions from the Times, vow to protect and bolster Social Security. Imagine that. Imagine Social Security employees, past and current, sold information to the Times. The Times then took that information and questioned the Social Security Administration, in which case the SSA, through the Republican existence, had to try and defend itself based off of internal things that the public would never have known. Do I want to know? Yeah, I do. I love it. Is it wrong that in order for that to occur, employees of the SSA past and current must basically commit fraud? Yeah, it's not good. I still want to know it. I still want to know it. A White House spokeswoman, Elizabeth Huston, said that under Mr. Trump, the agency will continue to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse while protecting benefits for eligible Americans. Cute. Very cute. Mr. Musk has cast his efforts to root out waste and fraud as a way to save Social Security, which he has called a Ponzi scheme. As you know, I did a video on how it is worse than a Ponzi scheme because you don't get a choice. You are born. You are born with an insignia on your body attached to your soul that you must pay taxes as an American if you earn into this program so that it can pay for you if you become old or disabled or a widow or basically a child under somebody who is disabled or passes, stuff like that. We do this because a little bit of socialism ain't a bad thing. It's not. I asked you this because I know some of you will say in the comments, how dare you? How dare you say a little bit of socialism acceptable? Let me ask you this. Most Americans, right, live in their head. They make choices based off of who they are. They're not worried about how other people think. But if we take a moment and we think about other people we know, we realize that those other people's brains work very differently than ours. And because they work very differently, some of those people do not work because they don't want to. Some of those people work very hard because they want the better life. They want to feel appreciated. They want to feel like they're achieving. All right. How do you convince these varying degrees of not going to work because they don't want to and working their butt off all the time, pushing? How do you convince these two groups to have the people who work pay for the people who don't work? Because if we don't pay for the people who don't work, they're going to do a lot of crimes, such as battery, such as theft, on and on. Because if somebody can't work and nobody's going to pay for them, what do you think they're going to do? Right? Now, here's a real sticky one for you. This one's going to hurt your brain a little bit and make you feel sad. Imagine for a moment, hypothetical, that America was not able to sell through socialism the idea of retirement benefits. Because remember, 1935, like that's when that shit was put on, ink on the paper and we grooved to it. We let it happen. Now imagine you are there and you're sitting there and life is okay and everything's all right and whatever. But imagine retirement benefits didn't exist. How do you tell to the American public that they are going to have to work 40 to 50 years of their life, some of them 60 to 70 years of their life? How do you tell them that they've got to work that, pay all those taxes, and then at the end of the day, not receive something from the government that taxed the shit out of them their whole life? You see, you got to have that little sweet treat, that little sugar right at the end. That way people keep trying. That way people keep wanting. You see, the rich and the middle class get effed, totally effed, because they got to give a bunch of money to the poor and they don't want to do that. I don't blame them. It's theft. It's theft to people who either can't work or don't want to work. Now, I got a soft spot for the disabled because I've worked with a lot of them and they can't work. But don't you shit show me at all that there's not a lot of people who aren't disabled that are getting a welfare check. They're getting an SI check who wiggled through. Don't shit me otherwise. I've been in this industry way too long. I've owned a law firm for almost 12 years in this industry. So my point to you is this. If you didn't have that little sweet treat, a little shug, you knew that you got to a certain age, they were going to give you a check every month. But if you didn't have that, would you have broken your butt? Would you have pushed as hard? Some of you would have pushed harder because you knew there was nothing at the end of the rainbow. I mean, a lot of you realize the rainbow's bull. And it's a very, very dark and depressing rainbow. But the reality is this, okay? I don't think most Americans would work as hard if they didn't have that little sugar called retirement at the end of their life to look forward to. That's the truth. I think emotionally, they know how to get into our brains. And they did it. Administration officials, in response to questions from the Times, vowed to protect and bolster Social Security. Mr. Musk has cast his efforts to root out waste and fraud as a way to save Social Security, which he has called a Ponzi scheme because of DOGE. He told Fox News, friendly to Elon, quote, legitimate recipients of Social Security will receive more money. Neither he nor Miss Miller, who left the White House alongside him, responded to requests for comments. The administration credits DOGE with identifying $1 billion in savings for this year. Out of Social Security's operating budget of $14 billion, citing canceled contracts, payroll cuts, and other measures, the White House did not provide a detailed accounting of that figure, and the Times could not verify it. So you got one group called the Republicans saying, look at all that we accomplished, saved a bunch of money. And then you got the other group saying, prove it. And what's ironic about this is that it's good. We want to see saved money. We just would like to see it, not spent shoving money overseas to other nations for other people. Because, we're not doing so great as a country ourselves. Mr. Dudek was recently placed on administrative leave, and Social Security is now run by Frank Bisignano, a former Wall Street executive who was confirmed as commissioner on May 6th. In an interview with the Times this month, Mr. Bisignano rejected the idea that DOGE was to blame for problems at Social Security. Now, listen to that sentence. Listen to how they frame that sentence. It's important. Mr. Bisignano rejected the idea that DOGE was to blame for problems at Social Security. That is how you write a sentence that makes the human brain think Mr. Bisignano doesn't believe that DOGE ruined the SSA, which makes our brain say, well, it must have been DOGE, must have been the Republicans. They must have ruined everything. And it's not fair because they're so good at manipulating the human brain. I was reading some LSAT questions. It's the test that you take before you go to law school, because I've got an employee that basically is working on going to law school. She's taking the LSAT, stuff like that. I read through these questions. The same manipulation tactics that they use in the LSAT questions, they use when they write these articles. And it's beautiful. I mean, you can manipulate the human mind to believe whatever you want. You can spin them this way or that way, and they'll go for it. But Mr. Bisignano acknowledged that the 40% figure cited by Mr. Musk was incorrect. We're going to be a fact-based, rule-based organization that can count, Mr. Bisignano said. In a statement later provided by the agency, Mr. Bisignano said the work that DOGE did was 100% accurate. That's beautiful. They got Mr. Bisignano saying on one day, we're going to be fact-based and accurate. And then the next day, purely a lie. Because obviously 100% of what DOGE did was not accurate. The Social Security Agency did not respond to a request to interview Mr. Dudek for this article. On his last day as acting commissioner, he wrote in a New York Post opinion piece that he was proud of the work he and his colleagues had done in the service of Mr. Trump's mandate to be bold, not bureaucratic. Yeah, he was definitely bureaucratic and bold. Bold is probably too small of a word for what was going on there. Still, Mr. Dudek, 48, has told associates that while he did his best to defend off deeper cuts, he harbors deep misgivings about the effect of DOGE's oversight, according to several people familiar with the conversations. Wait a minute. Let's read it again. Mr. Dudek, who's 48, Again, our brains think a 48-year-old should not be leading the Social Security Administration because we're used to old ass people in positions of power. A lot of other countries don't work that way because there's usually too much buildup when it comes to favors owed. And the younger people, they can stay up later. They can make more long-term choices, stuff like that. Mr. Dudek, 48, obviously too young, has told associates that while he did his best to fend off deeper cuts, he harbors deep misgivings about the effect of DOGE's oversight, according to several people familiar with the conversations. Who are these people? Literally, this entire article was asking us about how to validate the lies and misgivings of Trump and DOGE. But then at the same time, it will throw us a paragraph where it tells us, well, you know, according to several people familiar with the conversations. Who are these people? Well, they're protected sources who are anonymous that currently work with the SSA. What? So you're just going to tell me something and then never back it up? Is that what journalism is? It is. That's what journalism is now. During his tenure, Mr. Dudek described his role in the grandiose terms, suggesting to others that he saw himself in the mold of Oskar Schindler, the Nazi industrialist whose secret efforts to save the lives of Jews during World War II were portrayed in a critically acclaimed film. Yeah, I'm not seeing that connection as a Jewish person who had to fend off essentially what is then thought to be the Fuhrer, which would be Trump, from essentially taking away, you know, all these employees and doing all that stuff. I don't see Mr. Dudek as that. I don't see him anywhere near that. I see him many, many, many levels below that. I don't see his life being in danger for doing what he did. I don't see imminent potential harm as a part of the consequences of who he was for the employees of the SSA. I don't see any of that, okay? And you know what would happen in the 1940s and the 1930s. You know what I mean? You know what would have happened to somebody if they went against, right? You know what I mean? Like the government's existence as a political party. You know what they would have done to him. Quote, haven't they seen Schindler's List? Mr. Dudek asked about his colleagues, according to another employee who heard his remarks. Don't they know what's going on? Again, who is this employee? We have more witnesses that are completely anonymous. I mean, would this ever hold up in court? Would any of this stuff be accurate? Don't get me wrong. I genuinely believe that they have people who have heard these conversations, and I genuinely believe this is what actually happened. I believe it, but I don't see any proof of these anonymous people. I mean, I could make up a paragraph right now and just put it out there, right? And then they'd come to me and say, "Hey, well, one of our sources didn't say that." Prove it. Who are they? Prove to me your anonymous source didn't say that. I mean, I can make up shit too. I can unicorn the crap out of this article. Mr. Dudek was still a mid-level employee late last year when he first made contact with the DOGE team. That's right. Continue attacking the 48-year-old who is mid-level employee. He was in some ways an unlikely ally, a registered Democrat who once boasted on social media about receiving a personal letter from President Joseph R. Biden Jr. He had never managed more than about a dozen people at the agency. I got to be honest with you, from what I've seen about people managing companies, the people who manage small teams effectively are always better at managing people than people who manage hundreds of people, and the thing just keeps floating along and the thing just keeps doing what it's supposed to do as a company. So, like, to me, I don't know. Commissioner Dudek was a puppet, direct relation of Trump's executive orders and phone calls. That's what he was. Okay? That's what he was here. But as an anti-fraud advisor who had focused on problems like scammers stealing money intended for retirees, Mr. Dudek saw an opportunity to influence Mr. Musk's initiative. According to three people familiar with his thinking, he had long been fascinated. Again, according to three people familiar with his thinking, who are these people? He had long been fascinated by the idea of shaping bureaucracies from within, reading books with titles like Public Entrepreneurship and The Elements of Influence. One of those people said, so what's wrong with that? You think politicians are better? You want to swap out Dudek with the politician? You think we do better with a politician? Do any of you trust politicians? How many of you, I'm just curious, just with me right now, how many of you trust Bernie Sanders? Right? How many of you trust, okay, let's just pick the VP Vance, JD Vance, right? How many of you trust AOC? How many of you trust, let's pick somebody else, the governor of Florida? Anybody? Some of you love him. Some of you hate him. How many of you trust him? I like Rand Paul too, but again, I didn't bring him up. I see right there. I do like him. All right, with that said, so growing up, his family had relied on Social Security benefits for his mother's disability, and his wife, 72, currently receives Social Security payments, he has told colleagues. Wait, what? Growing up, his family had relied on Social Security benefits for his mother's disability, and his wife, 72, currently receives Social Security payments, he has told colleagues. His wife is 72? Hold on, let me check that real quick. That seems a little odd for what they just quoted him as a 48. Hold on. How old is Leland Dudek? Okay. So 48 to 49. Okay. How old is Leland Dudek's wife? Dudek's wife. Served acting commissioner. Let me find his wife in here. Hold on. Wife. Doesn't have it. Let me see if I can find it. Let me know if you guys can find it. Leland is 48 and his wife is 72. I demand more information. Yeah. People are responding to this situation too. Leland Dudek served as acting commissioner, Social Security hysteria, Trump, others. Does anybody know how old his wife is? Can anybody give some testimony on this one? Anybody at all? I have a hard time with a 48 to 49-year-old dating a 72-year-old. It doesn't mean it can't happen. I'm just confused. I'm just concerned. I'm seeing 21 and 90 here. I don't know what we got going on here. I'm a little worried here. The article took a spin for the worst here. All right, let's keep rolling. But Social Security had dedicated significant resources to fighting waste and fraud, and there was evidence that the effort had been effective. Less than 1% of the more than $1 trillion the agency pays out in benefits each year are considered improper payments, according to an Inspector General report. Significantly less than the rates for other large entitlement programs like Medicare and Medicaid. Shortly after Mr. Trump won the election, Mr. Dudek reached out to his contacts in private industry, hoping to find a connection to Mr. Musk's team. According to a person with knowledge of his outreach, one contractor introduced Mr. Dudek in mid-December to Steve Davis, an executive at several of Mr. Musk's companies, who was his right-hand man at DOGE. This person said. That's him, by the way. 48, 49, apparently dating a 72-year-old. I guess. You never know. You never know. Leland Dudek visiting a field office right there. Initially, Mr. Musk's deputies showed little public interest in Social Security, blah, 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 blah. All right. Let's get through the basic thing here. There's just more and more. It gets to an interesting part over here. Anxiety and long lines. Scare tactics. All right. My question to you guys is this. Do you believe that there's fraud at the SSA? Do you believe that that fraud is so aggressive and horrible that it creates essentially a situation where you start to lose trust in the government's abilities to go ahead and control your funds? Because that's what this comes down to. Are you willing to say that you love the Social Security Administration? Huh? All right, let me ask you this. I'm going to read to you some titles here. These are directly from the Office of Inspector General. These guys right here. Right here. I'm going to read you some titles. I just want you, after reading these titles, to tell me how high your trust level is in the Social Security Administration. So out of 100 right now, please remember to like and subscribe, guys. Hit that like button. Don't be afraid to hit that like button. Out of 100%, what percent do you trust the Social Security Administration right now? Before I start reading these, right now, where are you at? Are you at 50%, 20%, 75%? Where are you at? All right. Let's see what we need here. Okay. Former Social Security employee of West Sacramento sentenced to 4 years in prison for defrauding the Social Security Administration. Eric Lemoyne Willis, 46, West Sacramento, was sentenced today to 4 years in prison for conspiracy to defraud the United States, theft of government property, and aggravated identity theft, U.S. Attorney Philip A. Talbert announced. According to court documents, Willis and co-defendants Darren Dimitri Ross, 36 of Charlotte, North Carolina, and Joshua Bilal George, 39 of San Diego, conspired to steal public money from the Social Security Administration. Willis worked as an SSA operations supervisor in Sacramento and Lodi from 2015 until his departure in January 2018. During his time frame, Willis used his authority as an SSA employee to access the confidential Social Security records of numerous Social Security beneficiaries. These records contain personally identifiable information, including names, addresses, Social Security numbers, dates of birth, account numbers, family information, and benefit payment amounts. Willis would seek out personally identifiable information for beneficiaries who use direct deposit for payment of large benefits. Willis then gave this personally identifiable information to Ross, who resided in North Carolina. Ross and George's roles in these crimes included calling numerous SSA field offices across the country and using that stolen personal information to impersonate the beneficiaries. Ross also opened at least 44 online bank accounts under fraudulent identities to receive diverted SSA benefit payments. If Ross succeeded in convincing an SSA representative that he was the beneficiary, he would request that the beneficiary's direct deposit account be changed to one of the conspirators' fraudulent accounts. The SSA then proceeded to deposit benefit payments into the fraudulent account. The conspirators then withdrew the funds at ATMs and spent additional funds using debit cards associated with the accounts. Ross also transferred a portion of stolen proceeds to Willis for his participation in these crimes. After the fraud was detected, SSA stopped depositing benefit payments. The article goes on, but we have limited time. Next one. Social Security Administration employee accused of fraud and money laundering. Denver. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Colorado announced Justin Skiff, age 36, could be dating a 72-year-old, you never know, of Castle Pines, appeared in U.S. District Court today to face one count of each of wire fraud, Social Security fraud, and money laundering. According to the information filed in this case, beginning in August of 2019 and continuing through September 2021, it is alleged Skiff used his position as a claims specialist with the Social Security Administration to fraudulently obtain money from the SSA. Skiff is alleged to have filed fictitious claims for benefits using false identities and the identity of an actual individual to collect proceeds from these claims. According to court documents, Skiff's actions ultimately led to the theft of approximately $310,000 from the SSA. Skiff made his initial appearance before Magistrate Judge Kristen Elmix on December 15th, 2022. How's that percentage? You still feeling like you trust the SSA? All right, let's keep reading. And my point is, I want you to trust the agency. I just want you to realize that when they tell you the Republicans didn't really find that much fraud, these are Democrats finding fraud too during Biden's administration. Social Security Administration employee pleads guilty to fraud and money laundering. Okay. Hold on. That was the last one. Hold on. Here we go. Okay, former Social Security employee pleads guilty to pandemic fraud scheme. Scranton. United States Attorney's Office for the Middle District of Pennsylvania announced that Tikaya Gordon Austin, age 47, formerly of Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, pled guilty yesterday before U.S. District Judge Malaki E. Mannion for a scheme to fraudulently obtain unemployment benefits related to COVID-19 emergency relief funds. The Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program was created by the March 27, 2020 CARES Act as a part of the United States government's efforts to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on the public's health and economic well-being. Yada, yada, yada. According to U.S. Attorney Jared M. Karam, Austin pled guilty to 1 count of wire fraud, 1 count of aggravated identity theft. What a sweetheart. Okay. It goes on, but we don't have time. Former Social Security Administration. Oh, wait, hold on. This one pops up again. It's more about one of the cases. Hold on. Social Security employee pleads guilty to stealing government benefits. Atlanta. Latanja Goodrum, former Social Security employee who used her position to steal benefits from disabled supplemental security and Social Security supplemental security income beneficiaries, has pled guilty to a federal charge of theft of government funds. Quote, disabled and low-income citizens rely on the safety net afforded by Social Security Administration, says U.S. Attorney Ryan K. Buchanan. There's just a bunch of quotes about how they want to tell you how great they are. According to U.S. Attorney Buchanan, the charges and other information presented in court from approximately June through August of 2022, Goodrum, a claims specialist at the Social Security Administration's field office in Decatur, Georgia, illegally accessed the records of 6 SSI beneficiaries. Goodrum then used the personal identification information of these individuals to divert